Thank you. Karuyaktatan rishani kayaripak is a phrase in Quechua that in English means starting in a land far away. And not too long ago, I learned about a 12-year-old boy who'd been in love with a foreign land. He worked shining shoes and selling newspapers in La Plaza de Armas, which is one of the most touristy streets in the city of Cusco. And he'd walked considerable distances in the course of a day, shining the shoes of many people in the city. And from the stories he got to hear and people he got to meet, he was particularly drawn to those coming from the United States. Years later, he just finished school and time aligned just right for a program called the Visa Lottery, which is a highly sought out US immigration visa to accept applications from Peru, because Peru was identified among some of the countries with low immigration rates to the United States in the early 2000s. And it is literally by luck of the draw that you get chosen. And he formed part of the lucky few. And you could just imagine, he was extremely excited, as if he'd actually won the $1 million lottery. And this extremely excited young boy was my dad. He embarked on this journey with the rest of our family shortly after. And similar to him, many people today leave their home for a number of different reasons. People leave their home as migrants, as internally displaced people who are those fleeing their home within their country's borders. There are also people who leave their home as asylum seekers and as refugees, who are those forced to flee due to persecution, conflict, and natural disaster. And I went to school with many of these kids who left their home country along with their family for a better future. But you see, school was also where I first encountered light-skinned American kids from predominantly white backgrounds who opened my eyes just a little bit more to how I was perceived in this culture. I would often be referenced as brown. And I remember as a kid learning English taking that quite literally. In fact, I remember convincing my mom to buy me a set of Crayola crayons for a school experiment. And one by one, I aligned my fist to the brown pieces in the box, tirelessly, and I mean tirelessly trying to match my skin with the brown crayon, in hopes of finding relatable and affirming ways to define who I was. But you see, comments like these became less and less unusual because really, we're all programmed to notice difference. I'm not saying be cruel about it, but we all notice skin color. In fact, our brain is hardwired with an evolutionary legacy to divide the world we live in into two groups, the us and the them, where we are often kind, tolerable, understanding, empathetic to people we consider an in-group member, and we're completely the opposite to people we consider an out-group member, which is the them, or the other. And people coming from migrant, refugee, asylum-seeking backgrounds often fall in one of these two groups. But you see, this type of group membership often favors in-group members at the expense of out-group members. And I saw this whole concept play out a couple weeks ago when I visited a town in Greece, located in Kilkis. There was a very apparent division. The locals on one side and a handful of nonprofit organizations on this other side. And these were organizations specifically serving refugee families coming in from Turkey to Greece. And there was a very apparent divide. A number of these organizations, considering Greece's current tough economic crises, as well as the established tight community of people in that little town, a lot of the locals perceived the new families coming in as burdens. But you see, that changed when these organizations decided that they would rather invest in the town's small businesses to buy the furniture and supplies they needed rather than going to IKEA. And they did this intentionally because in this process, they let the locals know about who these refugee families were, the makeup of these new families. And little by little, believe it or not, a lot of the locals found they had a lot of things in common, and vice versa. And these new families were soon described as assets to their community, rather than burdens. But more than that, were described as actual human beings. And I would often wonder, well, what about if it were up to you or me to build our own little town or society from scratch, where things could be a little more fair and less divided, like in Kilkis? And one of my platonic crushes of all times, philosopher John Rawls, proposes the veil of ignorance as a way of seeing things in a different light. He says that behind this imaginary veil, We don't know anything about ourselves. We don't know our age, nationality, gender, occupation, the power we hold in that new society behind this veil. He says that then we would strive for a more fair and just equitable society. And philosopher Betts takes this even further, and he says, behind this veil, we are all potentially refugees. That refugees are ordinary people in exceptional situations. And the same stands true for any other group exemplifying human mobility today. But now imagine this, that you don't know if you're brown, black, or white. You don't know if you're rich or poor. You don't know if you're healthy or sick. You don't know if you're female, male, or identify within the LGBTQ community. You don't even know if you're Muslim, Catholic, or an atheist, just to name a few, of course. Behind this veil in this new society, how would you think of immigration policy? How would you feel about immigration policy? And this is where it gets a whole lot more interesting for me, because I arbitrarily asked 100 people what they would do to be more kind, tolerable, and understanding to people from refugee, asylum-seeking, and refugee backgrounds, including migrants. And 95% of the immediate response I would get consisted of a 4-letter word, and it was help. Not the type of help that you would scream if your house is on fire or if you're drowning in a pool, not at all. The type of help that would go along the lines of responses like this. Well, I would volunteer. I would be more generous with my time. I would be kinder to people and do a community service project. And you see, that's a great start, but it's also a problematic one. And here's why. Because helping means different things for many different people. And for some, it's a checkbox on a to-do list, often driven by self-interest. And see, I'm guilty of this. I formed part of that 95% when I also decided to go and help, specifically help rebuild the community center right in the plaza of the town in Quilquis. With a group of students, we rolled up our sleeves and began painting the wall, arranging the furniture, and decorating the room. Until one man from Syria in the room came in and he said, "Stop." He said, "I don't need you to paint the wall, arrange the furniture, or decorate this room. I can easily do that myself. I would love someone that I could have a conversation with or join me for a family lunch." And there was complete silence in the room. And to be completely honest with you, I was actually expecting a thank you because of all the hard work, dedication, time, and sweat I'd put into that project. But this man was right. I had lost complete focus on the point of the project. But more than that, this man in front of me, who also has dreams, aspirations, desires, and a family, could be me, could be you, could be my parents, could be a brother, an uncle. And what about if it were? You know, if it were you, how would you feel about a group of people coming in to help you without being 100% crystal clear on what you need help with, or if you need help with at all? And everything I was taught in Western culture backfired. And I asked myself, so if helping alone is not the answer to moving past this us and then mentality, then what is? And in trying to wrap my head around this, I would often wonder, well, how did people in the past manage to solve issues where division is so prevalent like it is now? And I think we've actually had the answer for a pretty long time, and it's really a simple one. But first, I know I had to do some soul searching, and that core to my identity are my cultural roots. And core to my ancestors' identity are 3 cornerstones, which they called the 3 cornerstones of the Inca law. And in Quechua, it goes like this: Amasua, Amaqueya, Amayuya, which translated to English means do not steal, do not lie, and do not be lazy. And I'm here to propose these 3 things, but with a twist. Number 1, do not steal. Don't steal from others the opportunity of getting to know you. Like the 12-year-old boy from Cusco, talk to others. Interact, respect, and socialize in communities that are different than yours, where you can engage in reciprocal learning, because that is key. And perhaps one of the things you learn, and this might sound totally crazy, is that a refugee camp is not a zoo. and that a migrant's experience goes beyond than that documentary you watched on Netflix the other day. Number 2, do not lie. Don't lie about what you don't know. Anybody you'll ever meet, like this man from Syria, knows something that you don't. And taking that from a humbling starting point, where rather than saying, oh, I know a whole lot because I've taken this very intense class, or I've read this really good book, or even I'm super active on this particular issue on Facebook, or this one's a shocker, oh, I went abroad. No, you come from a place of learning where you are at the edge of your seat, not because you're winning an argument, but because your mind has opened up to so much more. And number 3, don't be lazy. Don't be lazy with your everyday language. Just being a little more intentional about how you first introduce someone with their full name, preferred gender pronoun, story, or a strength that you admire from that person makes a huge difference, like the organizations in Kyrgyz did. Have you ever wondered why you often hear refugee child, refugee parent, maybe on the media from another person, rather than hearing child with refugee status or parent with refugee background? There's a big difference between the two. Because the term refugee itself is not someone's full identity. It's an experience and circumstance in the moment, like it is for many other identities. And Amasua, Amakeya, Amayuya are 3 things you can easily put into practice today and can go a long way. And they were 3 principles that my dad, as a boy, held true to. And even though coming to the United States was not all unicorns and rainbows, I know that some of his and my whole family's most cherished memories in this country has been when we felt included and part of something bigger. And even though this whole us and them rhetoric and mentality might feel like ripping off a Band-Aid because it is painful, it is complicated, we shouldn't get rid of it because it would be nearly impossible to do. No, we should move past it and cherish it because there is no other. We are all the other. I promise you, unexpected opportunities will present themselves in your lives where you will be able to steer away from stealing, lying, and laziness. And in that process, let those know in your circles that we are in it together, that we are on the same side, the side of solidarity, equity, and compassion for others. A close mentor of mine once said that the migrant crisis is our generation's civil rights movement. And so I say, let's start focusing on what unites us rather than on what is dividing us. Thank you.